They are California's most powerless children, abused, neglected, deeply traumatized. Yolanda was 2 and had been homeless when social workers rescued her from a troubled mother. D'Anthony was just as young when they took him from a mother addicted to drugs. Rochelle was a teen when she was removed from an abusive home. But when it came to managing their complicated childhoods, the state foster care system failed to provide them with a stable home. Instead, it gave them a pill.
So I'm going to ask you all to imagine for a second that you're a child in foster care. You've experienced significant trauma and abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, emotional abuse.
Why are so many foster kids being medicated with mind-altering drugs that are neither tested on nor approved for children? What are the dangers? Who is behind it? And how can we do better for the 60,000 children in the nation's largest foster care system? The Bay Area News Group spent more than a year investigating. We found a system that's become dependent on quick-fix, profit-driven pharmaceuticals to control troubled children, and a number of remarkably resilient young people who want to change it.
I heard I was 2 years old when I came into the foster care system.
It was 1993 when social workers took Yolanda from her mother, who had been living on the streets of Fresno. But young Yolanda soon found that life in foster care could be just as traumatic.
Sexual abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse happened when I was in the foster homes.
Yolanda grew angry, distrustful, and desperately lonely.
The foster homes ended up making me very put a shield up. I was scared. I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know who would believe me. So I would always act out. I didn't know how to really express my feelings because no one would ever to listen.
To numb her pain and control her outbursts, doctors prescribed her a series of powerful psychotropic drugs, a practice that has become all too common in foster care.
They're on an antidepressant, they're on something for sleep, they're on an antipsychotic, and then they're on something to treat the side effects of the antipsychotic. And then they're on sometimes multiple drugs of the same class, something that's considered a no-no. Now, when you have this many drugs interacting in the brain of the developing child, it's anybody's guess what outcome you're going to get. But the cumulative effects is to blunt the developmental process, to blunt the child altogether.
Our investigation found nearly 1 out of every 4 adolescents in California's foster care system is receiving psychotropic drugs. And 62% of those medicated kids are receiving the most powerful class of the drugs, antipsychotics. What experts found especially alarming is the reason for many of those prescriptions.
Antipsychotics are being used as a kind of chemical restraint. And although they're being used to treat what's called disruptive behavior, for example, really they're not treating a psychiatric condition. They're really being used as sedatives.
Under the law, doctors are free to prescribe medications for any treatment they see fit. But there are only limited uses for which federal regulators have approved psychotropic drugs, and many critics worry that it is dangerous to use them more broadly, especially for children. Antipsychotics are approved only for serious mental illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and severe cases of autism. Antidepressants are approved to treat major depression and obsessive-compulsive disorders. Mood stabilizers are approved for bipolar disorder in children. Stimulants to treat ADHD, narcolepsy, and obesity.
I have been on lithium, Depakote, Neurontin, Haldol, Zyprexa, Risperdal, Ativan, Paxil, Prozac, Effexor. There's so many medications. Ambien, Trazodone.
If a child seems depressed, another drug is added. If they act aggressively, more drugs. This sets them on a course that future doctors are reluctant to reverse.
I think they're worried that, well, maybe if I see the child as this, say, explosive with the medications, what would it be like if I took them off? I better add something else. That's the kind of thinking. Whereas the medication really isn't addressing what needs to be addressed.
This is going to make you feel better. It's going to make you do better. But in reality, nobody really wants to deal with you.
The combination of the Vyvanse and the Seroquel together made it much so a chemical restraint for me.
I felt like I'm supposed to be taking these medications because the doctor told me to.
There were times where I felt like if I didn't take the medication, I would be disappointing my therapist or I'd be disappointing my social worker.
You're not with your mom and dad. You may have sustained an injury from your mom and dad. You're all confused. And so, based upon your development, you may lash out. You may not have the language to say what you're feeling. You may throw a chair. You may cry, you may punch a kid next to you. And giving this child a pill is not the answer.
For many children, foster care often translates to being moved to a new home again and again. And those who have worn out their welcome with foster families or relatives can end up in some of the least family-like settings, group homes that house tough-to-place kids. The system moved Rochelle 23 times in 5 years. Yolanda moved an astounding 50 times before her 13th birthday. D'Anthony Dandy moved 29 times.
Number 1, July 26, 05 to June 10th, 07, I was in Positive Links Group Home in Oakland, California. My second placement, my third placement, my fourth placement.
He bounced among 14 schools and 11 different group homes.
I went back to Positive Links Group Home in Oakland. I was at Elite Family System in Ceres,
where his aggression grew and he mimicked the behaviors of other troubled youth.
I was at JT Residential in San Jose. Hold on. My 10th placement was...
often throwing the first punch to survive.
Like, nobody understands where I actually come from on the inside. And they see the outside, they see me acting up, they see me fighting, breaking stuff.
Some stress how difficult it can be to care for challenging children. They argue medication can be a necessary trade-off to keep a child from being moved yet again.
That if a child is really difficult to manage, if their behaviors are out of control, they're at risk of losing their placement, losing the place they live, and essentially being kicked back to somewhere else. So being able to stabilize a child's behavior often can be the difference between a long-term placement and many short-term broken placements.
No place in California's foster care system depends on psychiatric meds more than group homes, where maintaining order can overshadow managing a child's fragile mental health.
Oftentimes we do see requests not only from foster parents but from group homes that say, well, unless you put them on such and such medication, you have to find another home. That's horrible. That's holding the child hostage unless you give them medication that they want. That just shouldn't be.
Those who tried to refuse medications told us they were often punished.
I don't feel like I had a choice. If you don't take medications in a group home, you get penalized. You lose points, you lose privileges. The staff write in their staff communication log that you're being non-compliant. You know, you can't use the phone in certain group homes if you're not being compliant. You don't get privileges like going outside.
It's like a remote control car. They want to be in control. They want to be able to move that car wherever they want it to move. You act bad? Oh, we'll just add more.
There is no dispute that even the riskiest drugs can be life-saving for the small sliver of kids who suffer from mental illnesses like schizophrenia and severe types of autism.
So I have 2 children who I adopted from foster care who both take medication. My son, Jaquil, is 17, and he has autism, ADHD, and apraxia, which is a speech impediment. And my son, Smith, is 11, and he has autism and an intellectual disability.
Okay. Aye.
He doesn't really have any violent behaviors. His behaviors are more danger to himself. Like he'll like walk on high railings and like it's a balance beam and not realize that he's 4 stories up. He's previously tried to climb out of a car on a freeway while it was moving. So the medication has really helped him with controlling those impulses and controlling, thoughts that would get him hurt otherwise. I definitely think that there are some things we would not be able to accomplish without medication. Simple things like a trip to Target or participating in activities with other kids where there's multiple stimuli, being able to be in a park where there aren't fences all around it would be impossible.
But many former foster children say they were wrongly labeled with rare mental illnesses when what they were really suffering from was the unbearable trauma of being abused, abandoned, or both. Rochelle Trautenberg started taking medication after she was rescued from sexual and physical abuse at home. But the medications did nothing to help her begin to overcome the source of her pain.
So there were at times when I broke things or punched walls. I punched a lot of walls. I banged my head against walls a lot. Anything to just get the thoughts to stop for a second, to get the flashbacks to stop for a second.
Antipsychotics and mood stabilizers can be life-saving for someone with true bipolar disorder. That is very rare in children and adolescents. I've seen 2 adolescents in my career of about 40 years.
Not only did I have lots of prescriptions, I also had a whole list of diagnoses: bipolar, schizoaffective, major depression, generalized anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bulimia, nervosa. Gosh, I'm sure the list goes on.
And lists like those are common in foster care.
Over a period of, say, maybe 5 to 7 years, in their medical record, they will have pretty much every diagnosis under the sun. And I'm going like, look at this. They've got every single diagnosis. So you can't have schizophrenia, bipolar, psychotic, all of these things. So somewhere along the line, we didn't get the right diagnosis.
In the short term, psychotropics can calm volatile moods, make aggressive children more docile, and even keep them safe. But there is growing and significant evidence of many of the drug's dramatic side effects.
They cause sedation, they impair ability to learn, they basically dull everything.
Weight gain, diabetes, obesity, lipidemia, which is high cholesterol.
They lead to tics of the face, for example, involuntary movements.
Seen children who've gained 60 or 80 pounds, and you know what that does to a teenager, both to their sense of themselves when they don't feel very good about themselves to start with, but also it's metabolically very dangerous.
This is probably a photo of me at my largest weight, which is, I'm 18 here. I've been out of foster care for approximately 2 to 3 months. And from 17 to 18, I really put on a lot of weight. Like that's when, over the course of 2 years, that's 100 pounds.
I felt drowsy on the medications. I felt like a zombie a lot. I couldn't stay awake. I had a lot of weight gain, thyroid problems.
I was told that the medication would make me feel happy and it would make me feel like I wanted to do things, but instead I felt like a zombie, and I felt like the medication kind of like took away like my personality.
In school, like for, I'm gonna say my first 3-4 classes, I'd be I'd be nodding up, put my head on my desk. And then the teacher would get mad because I won't wake up. Like he'd be like, Anthony, wake up. And then I'll wake up, then go right back to sleep.
I was pretty much I couldn't speak. Like I was slurring my words a lot and I couldn't move. I was depressed. Pretty much everything that they were looking for in a foster child to fail.
Perhaps even more alarming is what is not known about the long-term consequences of psychotropic drug use in children.
The effects on the developing child's brain are unknown, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all.
I wonder if my cognitive functioning would be different now had I not been on drugs, and there's no way to know that. And I still have tremors in my hands, and I think that relates to the psychotropic medication. It didn't happen before that, and it hasn't stopped since it first appeared. And here I am off medications for, I don't know, maybe a decade or close to that, and I still have these hand tremors that won't go away. It can be embarrassing, just drinking water and bringing it up to my mouth it's visible to people and they ask questions about it. And so I'm always like, oh, I don't know, it's maybe hereditary or something, because I don't want to tell people, oh, I have a tremor because I was drugged for my whole adolescence and this is the side effect.
Prescribing powerful antipsychotics to manage disruptive behavior isn't just questionable medical practice. It's costing California taxpayers tens of millions of dollars a year.
Pharmaceutical sales representatives are hired to sell, period.
For years, the country's biggest drug makers have been aggressively marketing their most expensive psychotropic drugs. And doctors who treat California's foster children are among their coveted targets.
Good morning to one and all. We welcome and thank you for being at this hearing.
In 2008, Shahram Ahari, a former sales rep for the pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly, testified before the U.S. Senate about the tactics drug companies employ to influence doctors. Lawmakers were concerned about the growing use of antipsychotics among another vulnerable group, nursing home patients.
To reinforce our sales efforts, we look for credible, loyal physicians to speak on our product's behalf. We tout these doctors as objective thought leaders, but we have no reservations in dismissing them when their product loyalty falls into question. Furthermore, we supply these doctors with presentations crafted by our marketing department that expound on the points that we reps make. This provides marketing synergy. Selected physicians repeat a sales pitch, masked in scientific credibility.
They sought out primary care doctors who were not bound by a drug's label, willing to push the dose of medications. They instructed sales reps to not introduce the issue of weight gain.
We not only enter a physician's office armed with information, but also with a vast arsenal of gifts, including pens, pads, clipboards, food, and samples. And we have many subtle ways to remind doctors of our generosity.
And the newspaper found just how generous pharmaceutical companies have been to the doctors who prescribe psychiatric drugs to California foster children. From 2010 to 2013, drug companies gave foster care prescribers $14.2 million for meals, travel, gifts, speaking engagements, and company-sponsored research projects. These doctors received an average of more than $15,000 apiece. That's almost 4 times more than the average California doctor received. And the California foster care doctors who prescribed the most typically were rewarded the most. For the drug companies, the investments paid off. California taxpayers spent $226 million on psychotropic drugs over the last decade, more than the state spent on any other kind of medication for foster kids. And youth like DeAnthony were the ones who ultimately paid the price.
DeAnthony often had to move from school to school. I believe it was a total of 14 schools. So 29 placements, 14 schools. He wasn't able to create deep and meaningful relationships with people. He wasn't able to be a child. He was trying to survive.
Just plain surviving foster care is difficult enough. Finding somebody to trust is even harder. DeAnthony was blessed to find Tara Beckman. She wasn't a foster parent or a social worker or a lawyer. She was a volunteer, one of Alameda County's court-appointed special advocates, who looked hard enough to see through his violent outbursts and the medication that did nothing to help.
He was very aggressive, physically aggressive, verbally aggressive. He was acting out, threatening staff, threatening peers. He was very angry. But when I saw him, I saw sadness and hurt, rejection. I felt his sorrow.
She just is there for me. She took me to the Pinnacles. She took me to Yosemite, I think. Every time we get together, she taking me out to eat. I tried sushi for the first time with her. The 40 Rock Niner roll was hella good. It was hella good.
I remember him one day saying to me, you know, when I'm at the residential treatment, Tara, I feel so angry, but when I'm with you, I feel so calm.
Tara went beyond the usual role of a volunteer advocate and pushed for DeAnthony's doctors, social workers, and lawyer to support his decision to stop the medication when he was 17. And when she realized DeAnthony needed to discover where he came from, she found his birth mother and arranged a reunion.
This is you. Hey, I had long hair. Yeah, you did. Now this is that's your birthday cake, your first.
DeAnthony and his mother reunited in January 2011 after more than a decade apart.
Here's your dad. That's your dad. And he's holding you and Darion. There. There. See? Player will try to pick you up. I love you so much. I love you. Oh, God. I love you so much. So much. So much.
He wanted to feel that nurturing from a mother. And when he got that hug, I think it was what he had been waiting for so many years, was to feel that love and that nurturing of someone who just loved him unconditionally. And that no matter how much he messes up and how many mistakes he makes, that his family will be there for him.
We all love him. We got family. Got a big family. Big family.
I cannot count the number of times that I have seen children on multiple medications who are really suffering from a broken heart. The treatment for a broken heart is not another medication. The treatment for sadness is not an antipsychotic or an antidepressant in a child. That's not a first-line treatment. First-line treatment is just to understand, to listen to the child. What's going on? Why are you sad this way? And oftentimes these children have no one that they feel that they can rely on or trust, because every bond that they've had has already been broken.
And we thought they were expecting us.
Right.
Hi. Hi, Levin. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good to see you.
Hi, Levin.
Kevin,
been
you're
so
not calling me
long.
Gramps anymore. Hi.
Aw. Wow, let me take a good look.
Thank you, Nancy.
For Yolanda, finding someone to trust was even harder. Then, at 12 years old, she landed at the Lincoln Child Center, a residential group home in Oakland. There, she met Dr. Edmund Levin and therapist Nancy Forrester. Levin had recently started at Lincoln. Stunned by the amount of medication that so many of the children had been prescribed, he embarked on a bold plan. Over the next 2 years, he reduced medication among his patients by 80%. And Yolanda would become one of his most successful patients.
And here was Yolanda's house. This is east. This was eventually this was Yolanda's room, and the bed was was that direction. She came to us probably about a kindergarten level of functioning, and she was probably 12. And she was, it was kindergarten. She could barely read and write. I could barely hear what you were saying because your speech was so slurred. I wondered if you were appropriate, Yolanda, to come to our program. Were you able to hear, see, speak everything well enough because you were so medicated?
In May of this year, we asked Dr. Levin, Forrester, and Yolanda to meet for the first time since Yolanda left the center.
We were able to see what would happen when you were off medication. And so we carefully, gradually tapered it down. The more we tapered you down, it was just delightful to see that, the more you perked up, the less zombie-like you were, the better your speech was, and the more I think you were able to really participate in therapy.
It was consistent that as our meds went down, incident reports for misbehavior went down.
Yolanda's experience affirmed what Dr. Levin and Forrester thought all along. Using powerful drugs to treat traumatized foster youth isn't the solution.
Went to your room one night. You were studying the dictionary, trying to catch up.
Still have it.
Wow.
And I just, as a mom, was like, wow. Because as you were waking, as those drugs were coming down, you were waking up and just saying, teach me.
Lincoln freed Yolanda from the drugs. But still today, she's frightened that there are lingering effects of the medication.
They also have a very scary metabolic effect, such that people have described some of the side effects as involving metabolic X syndrome, where your blood sugars get adversely affected.
I know that.
You know that, good. A lot of people don't, so let me say it out loud because I think we're on film right now. Your blood sugars can get affected and you can get diabetic.
I know that.
And I don't have to go on there and say it.
I feel is that a day that goes by that I feel a change in my body. I just ask God every single day to strengthen me. I just ask for, I just want people, I don't want people going through this. This is not right.
And I would ask at this time for any comments or suggested revisions from the council on the discussion highlights. Are there any?
If you're a foster youth, you've entered foster care, you're in a new home, a new setting, a new community, maybe even a new school. Maybe you've switched schools many times. These are all things that impact mental health and well-being. And are we treating that, or are we treating a label with a pill?
When she aged out of foster care, Rochelle stopped taking medication and finally met a therapist who listened. Soon she discovered part of her healing was to speak out. So she went to Sacramento to fight for change.
My name is Rochelle Trottenberg. I'm the youth organizer for the Humboldt County Transition Age Youth Collaboration, and I'm a former foster youth.
For almost 3 years, state officials have been working under a federal mandate to review the use of psychiatric medications on foster children. They've assembled a statewide panel of experts to study the problem and recommend solutions.
I really want to be a part of changing the system, especially for those youth who get labeled as high risk or mentally ill, or all the labels that I found myself in.
But reformers say the state is moving too slow.
I mean, it just seems it would help this group and the data and technology group if we had some sort of initial data about how many kids are on psychotropic meds, what are those psychotropic meds, how long are they on those psychotropic meds, how many prescriptions have been.
We're approaching the 2.5-year mark now that we've been working with lead agencies on this problem in California. And we have very little to show for it.
How we're going to mitigate those.
Grimm and others are frustrated by the bureaucracy of the 2 state agencies that oversee the care and medical needs of foster children.
It's really been a mixed experience. On the one hand, it seemed like there were some great leaders behind this effort and who really want to see changes happen. And yet, on the other hand, we're being stuck in this big bureaucratic machine.
Most agree there is a problem, but there's little consensus on what should be done.
If the response is to simply reduce access to medicine, then I think children will be worse off as a population. I think what we really need to focus on is how do we provide appropriate quality mental health services to children.
Department of Social Services Director Will Lightbourne, who oversees foster care, turned down requests to be interviewed on camera. But he told the newspaper his agency is making progress on the issue. He said sometimes medication may be appropriate, but he acknowledged psychotropics should be the end, not the start.
We need to sort of get off the dime and move ahead with some reforms that actually ensure greater safety and appropriate care for kids. Kids cannot wait any longer. We don't need to create thousands of zombies in foster care like for years have existed in nursing homes who are on these same antipsychotic drugs.
There is life after medication. All of the former foster youth interviewed for this story have found better ways to heal from their years of trauma. For D'Anthony, it is music.
I start with this. You gotta start with the main sound you gonna have.
With mental health or emotional health needs, things that have to do with expression of self and self-love, self-identity, like music, dance, yoga, meditation, those types of creativity as therapy is what you say, hey, that really helped me process that trauma or connect with someone else who had experienced grief like I have.
Feel me? Give you that amp.
Every time he gets in my car, he'll say, hey, do you want to hear this new song? Do you want to hear this? I did that beat, Tara. I did that beat.
This keep me out of trouble. Just take out anger out and making music and stuff. Being better. Being somebody. That's why I do it.
With Tara's support and a growing connection to his mother and brother, D'Anthony is medication-free. This year, he graduated high school.
45–50% of foster youth obtain their high school diploma. And he's one of those. He's one of those kids.
He's thinking about college and just started a new job as a peer counselor for homeless youth.
Go get him.
Rochelle finds peace in simple ways.
I think making bread, doing my gardening, playing with my dogs, taking walks in the forest, going to the beach, those are all the things that bring wellness into my life that foster care never brought.
This is my apartment. I live in a studio. My bedroom's back here.
Yolanda's recovery continues. She is living on her own now in Fresno and discovering new strength through a healthy diet and frequent trips to the gym. The Lincoln experience and a strong foster mom who took her in afterward gave Yolanda a path forward.
I'm grateful every day that you guys helped me to
let us help you. That was
you guys
beauty.
were you guys were, I want to say in my terminology, like an angel.
The more time it takes us to do something about it, that's young people right now being over-medicated, experiencing terrible side effects, impeding their development, their normal development, and that's not okay to me, and that shouldn't be okay to most people.